The morning shift bell rang through the corridors of the starship Harmony. The sound echoed off metal walls and reached every corner of the massive vessel. Crew members from different worlds began their daily routines. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated through the air or moved with tentacles. All of them had one thing in common. They were explorers traveling through the deep darkness of space. In the lower engineering decks, Minji sat alone at her workstation. She wore the standard blue uniform of the Harmony crew. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her dark eyes focused on the computer screen in front of her. Numbers and diagrams filled the display. Energy readings from the ship's main power core scrolled past her view. Minji had been working on the Harmony for 8 months. In all that time, she had spoken maybe 50 words to her crewmates. She answered questions with nods or shakes of her head. When she had to speak, her voice came out quiet and careful. Most of the time, she just listened. The other humans on the ship found her behavior strange. Captain Down had tried many times to include her in conversations. He would ask about her day or invite her to join the evening meal in the main dining hall. Minji would look down at her hands and mumble a polite excuse. She always ate alone in her quarters or in empty storage rooms. The alien crew members had different ideas about Minji. The Vorthak were tall beings made of living crystal. They could communicate by changing the colors of their bodies. To them, silence was normal. They thought all humans were quiet like Minji. The Quillen had 6 arms each and could work on multiple tasks at once. They respected anyone who focused on their job without distraction. The Nethros lived in special gas-filled suits. They spoke in musical tones that most other species found beautiful. They assumed Minji was just shy around aliens, but Minji was not shy. She was careful, very careful every morning. She checked the ship's systems with the dedication of someone whose life depended on perfect machinery. She knew every pipe, every wire, and every circuit board in the engineering section. When something needed fixing, she fixed it before anyone else noticed the problem. Her work reports were always complete and accurate. She never made mistakes. Today felt different, though. As Minji reviewed the overnight sensor logs, something caught her attention. Deep space was supposed to be empty in this sector. The ship was traveling between star systems, far from any planets or space stations. But the sensors showed unusual energy patterns. Very faint signals coming from a direction where nothing should exist. Minji studied the readings more carefully. The energy signatures were artificial. Someone or something was out there, hidden in the darkness between stars. The signals were not from any known species or technology in the Alliance database. This was something new. Something that might be dangerous. She started to reach for the communication button to call Captain Dowan. Her hand stopped halfway. What would she say? How could she explain what she found without sounding foolish? The readings were so faint that other crew members might think she was seeing things that were not there. Instead, Minji saved all the data to a secure file. She wrote a detailed report describing the energy patterns and their possible sources. She checked her work 3 times to make sure every detail was correct. Then she submitted the report through the ship's official channels. The computer confirmed that her report was filed and would be reviewed by the command staff within 24 hours, but Minji knew how these things worked. Her report would go into a queue with dozens of other routine maintenance reports. Someone would glance at it, see that it was not an immediate emergency, and file it away for later review. Later could mean days or weeks. By then, the Harmony might be far from this location. The rest of her shift passed quietly. Minji continued her normal duties, but part of her mind kept thinking about those energy readings. Something was wrong about them. The patterns reminded her of military scanning systems, but she could not be sure. Her knowledge of military technology came from a past she tried very hard to forget. At lunchtime, the dining hall filled with conversation in a dozen different languages. Captain Dalen sat with his senior officers at a large table near the center of the room. The alien crew members gathered in groups based on their dietary needs. Some ate liquid nutrients. Others consumed energy directly from small power cells. Mingji took her meal tray to a small table in the corner. She ate quickly and quietly, listening to the conversations around her. The science team was excited about some new star formations they had discovered. The medical staff discussed improvements to the ship's hospital. The security team complained about how boring their job was on a peaceful exploration vessel. Nobody talked about unusual energy readings or hidden threats in space. Nobody seemed worried about anything more dangerous than running out of coffee supplies that after eating. Minji returned to her workstation. She pulled up the sensor data again and ran additional analysis programs. The energy patterns were definitely artificial. They had the structured quality of technology, not the random fluctuations of natural phenomena. But she still could not identify what kind of technology created them. As the day shift ended, other engineering crew members stopped by to chat with each other. They talked about their families back home, their hobbies, and their plans for shore leave at the next space station. A few of them tried to include Minji in their conversations. "Hey, Minji, want to join us for cards tonight?" asked Jaewon, a young technician from Earth. Minji shook her head and pointed to her computer screen. "Still working," she said softly. "You work too much," said Sunho, an older engineer who had served on 3 different ships. "The Harmony won't fall apart if you take one evening off." Minji gave him a small smile but did not answer. She waited until the others left before continuing her analysis. Late that night, when most of the crew was asleep, Minji made her way to the cargo bay. She had modified one of the storage areas into a private workshop. Here, surrounded by spare parts and maintenance equipment, she practiced skills that had nothing to do with engineering. She moved through combat exercises with fluid precision. Her body remembered training from years ago, even though her mind tried to forget. She practiced with improvised weapons made from ship components. A wrench became a club. A plasma cutter became a sword. Electrical cables became restraints. These midnight sessions were her secret. No one on the Harmony knew about her past. Her personnel file listed her as a civilian engineer with excellent technical skills. It said nothing about military training or combat experience. That was exactly how she wanted it. But as Minji worked through her exercises, she could not shake the feeling that her peaceful life was about to end. Those energy readings meant something. Somewhere in the darkness of space, something was watching and waiting. She just hoped she was wrong. 3 days passed before Captain Daeon finally read Minji's report. He sat in his private office, drinking morning coffee and reviewing routine maintenance files. Most reports were simple updates about working systems and minor repairs. But Minji's report made him stop reading and lean forward in his chair. The energy signatures she described were not normal. Daeon had 20 years of experience commanding ships in deep space. He knew the difference between natural phenomena and artificial technology. These readings looked like scanner sweeps from military vessels. Daeon called his senior officers to an emergency meeting. Commander Hyunwoo arrived first, followed by Science Officer Youngmi and Security Chief Taeyeon. They gathered around the conference table as Daeon displayed Minji's data on the main screen. "How long ago did we receive this report?" asked Hyunwoo. 3 days, Daeon replied. It got buried in the routine maintenance queue. Youngmi studied the energy patterns carefully. "These signatures are definitely artificial. They look like long-range scanning beams. Someone was watching us from a distance." Taeyeon crossed his arms. "Why didn't our sensors detect these signals immediately? Our equipment should have found them automatically." "The signals were very weak," Daeon explained. "They required detailed analysis to identify. Most crew members would have missed them completely." The officers looked at each other with growing concern. The Harmony was an exploration vessel, not a warship. They carried scientific equipment and research materials, not weapons or military defenses. If someone was tracking them with hostile intent, they had very few options for protection. "We should change course immediately," suggested Hyunwoo. "Put distance between us and whatever is out there." Daeon nodded. "Agreed. Plot a new course for the Centauri sector. We can continue our mission from there. But as the bridge crew began preparing for the course change, their sensors detected something that made everyone freeze. Massive objects were appearing on their screens. Ships were materializing from what looked like empty space. Surrounding the Harmony in a perfect circle, the enemy vessels were enormous, each one 3 times larger than the Harmony. They had angular black hulls, covered in weapon ports and sensor arrays. Strange symbols glowed along their sides in colors that hurt to look at directly. These were warships built for destruction and intimidation. "How many ships?" Dowan asked, trying to keep his voice calm. 15, reported the sensor operator. All of them are powering up weapon systems. On the main screen, the face of an alien creature appeared. It had the general shape of an insect, but it was the size of a human. Its eyes were compound like a fly's eyes, made of thousands of tiny black surfaces. Sharp mandibles clicked as it spoke. 4 arms ended in razor-sharp claws. Its skin looked like black metal armor. "I am War Commander Vex of the Corvan Empire," the creature announced. Its voice sounded like grinding metal. "Your vessel will surrender immediately. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and the death of your crew." Captain Dion stepped forward. "This is Captain Dion of the Alliance vessel. Harmony, we are on a peaceful exploration mission. We have no conflict with your empire." Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace is weakness. Your alliance speaks of cooperation while we speak of conquest. You will surrender your ship and your crew. We have use for both. What do you want with us?" Dowan asked. "Your crew will be studied and tested. The strong ones will become slaves in our factories. The weak ones will become food for our warriors. Your ship will be added to our fleet after we remove your inferior technology." The communication ended. Immediately, the Corvan ships began moving closer to the Harmony. Docking tubes extended from their hulls like metal tentacles reaching for prey. "Emergency alert," Dowan announced over the ship's communication system. "All crew members report to designated safety areas immediately. This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, alarms began ringing. Crew members from dozens of different species rushed through corridors toward the main cargo bay and other large spaces. The Vorthek moved with crystalline grace despite their panic. The Quillen used all 6 arms to help slower crew members. The Nethros floated in their gas-filled suits, their musical voices now singing songs of fear. In the engineering section, Minji heard the alarms and the captain's announcement. She looked at her computer screen one last time. The energy readings she had detected 3 days ago now made perfect sense. The Corvan had been watching the Harmony. Studying its movements and planning this attack, she started to move toward the main cargo bay with the other crew members. But as she walked through the corridors, something made her stop. The route to the cargo bay led past several maintenance shafts and service tunnels. These passages were too small for most crew members, but Minji was smaller than average. She could fit through spaces that others could not reach. Instead of continuing toward the cargo bay, Minji turned and opened a maintenance panel. She climbed into the service tunnel and began moving toward a different part of the ship. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of Corvan soldiers boarding the Harmony. Their metal feet rang against the floor plates. Their harsh voices echoed through the corridors as they shouted orders in their own language. By the time Minji reached her destination, the Corvan had gathered all the visible crew members in the main cargo bay. She watched through a ventilation grate as dozens of insect-like warriors surrounded her friends and colleagues. The aliens held weapons that looked like metal, spears with energy crackling along their tips. War Commander Vex stood in front of the captured crew. "You are now property of the Corvan Empire," he announced. "Those who cooperate will live longer than those who resist. Those who attempt escape will die slowly as an example to others." Captain Deoan stood at the front of the group, trying to shield the younger crew members. "These people are non-combatants, scientists and engineers. They pose no threat to you." "All aliens are threats until they are properly broken," Vex replied. "Your species will learn obedience or face extinction." Minji counted the enemy soldiers. In the cargo bay, 20 Corvin warriors, all armed and alert. She could see more guards positioned throughout the ship's corridors. The total number of invaders had to be at least 60, maybe 70. She watched as several crew members tried to speak with the Corvin soldiers. Jaewon, the young technician who had invited her to play cards, asked for water for the older crew members. A Corvin warrior struck him with the butt of its weapon, sending him to the floor with blood running from his nose. Yomi tried to reason with War Commander Vex, explaining that the Harmony carried only scientific equipment and research data. Vex ordered 2 soldiers to drag her away from the group. Her screams echoed through the cargo bay before being cut off by the closing of a door. Minji felt something cold settle in her stomach. These were not negotiators or reasonable beings. The Corvin were predators who enjoyed causing pain and fear. They would torture and kill her crewmates for entertainment, while they decided which ones were valuable enough to keep as slaves. She began moving through the ventilation system toward the upper decks. Her movements were silent and careful. Years of training had taught her how to move without making noise, how to become invisible even in small spaces. As she climbed through the ship's hidden passages, Minji's mind shifted into a different mode. The quiet engineer who avoided conversations and ate alone was disappearing. Something else was taking her place. Something that had been sleeping for a long time but was now waking up. The Corvin had made a mistake. They thought they had captured a ship full of helpless scientists and technicians. They did not know that one member of the crew was not what she appeared to be. Minji reached an access panel near the ship's armory. She opened it carefully and peered into the corridor beyond. 2 Corvin guards stood outside the weapons storage room, but they were facing the wrong direction. They expected threats to come from the main corridors, not from inside the walls. She waited until both guards moved away on patrol. Then she slipped out of the ventilation system and entered the armory. The room was filled with emergency equipment that the Harmony carried for protection against space pirates and hostile wildlife on unexplored planets. Minji selected items that would be useful for the kind of fighting she had in mind. A plasma cutter that could slice through metal. Magnetic climbing gear for moving through the ship's superstructure. Emergency oxygen supplies for extended operations. And several devices that were officially listed as mining tools, but could serve other purposes in the right hands. As she prepared her equipment, Minji thought about her crewmates trapped in the cargo bay. Captain Daeon, who had tried so hard to make her feel welcome. Hyunwoo, who had respected her need for privacy. Jaewon, who had been kind enough to invite her to social activities even when she always said no. They were her family now, even if she had never told them so. And no one threatened her family without consequences. The war was about to begin. The first Corvin soldier disappeared 6 hours after the invasion began. His name was Warrior Crix, and he had been assigned to guard the upper deck storage areas. He was supposed to report to his commander every 30 minutes. When his scheduled communication time passed without contact, War Commander Vex assumed it was equipment failure. Crix was found 3 hours later in a maintenance closet. His weapon was missing. His communication device had been destroyed. There were no obvious wounds on his body, but he was very much dead. The ship's medical scanner showed that his nervous system had been disrupted by a precise electrical shock. Vex studied the scene with growing irritation. How did this happen? He demanded from his remaining soldiers. Unknown, War Commander, replied his second-in-command. The corridor sensors show no movement. No crew members were seen in this area. Then explain how a prisoner killed one of my warriors while locked in the cargo bay. The second-in-command had no answer. Vex ordered increased patrols and stricter security protocols. He also commanded that any crew member who looked suspicious should be beaten as a warning to others, but the disappearances continued. Warrior Vex vanished from his post near the engine room. His body was found stuffed inside a power conduit, electrocuted by the ship's own electrical systems. Warrior Moore disappeared while guarding the bridge access tunnel. He was discovered in the recycling center, crushed by machinery that had somehow activated while he was inside. By the end of the first day, 5 Corvin soldiers were dead. None of the crew members in the cargo bay could explain what was happening. They sat in confused groups, whispering among themselves about the mysterious deaths. Captain Daewon had his own theories, but he kept them to himself. During the evening meal distribution, he managed to quietly count the crew members. Everyone was accounted for except one person. Minji was missing from the group. The quiet engineer had not been seen since the initial capture. Daewon had assumed she was hiding somewhere, too frightened to come out. Now he wondered if there might be another explanation. Commander Vex was also beginning to suspect that someone was fighting back. He increased security patrols and installed additional sensors throughout the ship. But the deaths continued anyway. On the second day, 3 more soldiers died in incidents that the Corvin commanders described as equipment malfunctions. Warrior Vash was killed when a maintenance robot somehow activated and attacked him with welding tools. Warrior Quinn died when the atmospheric controls in his section were changed to pump toxic gases into the air. Warrior Zelt was found floating in a flooded compartment, where the water recycling systems had been sabotaged. The remaining Corvin soldiers began to show signs of fear. They moved in larger groups and refused to patrol alone. They jumped at unexpected sounds and fired their weapons at shadows. Some of them claimed they had seen a figure moving through the corridors, but when they investigated, they found nothing. "It is impossible," Vex declared during a meeting with his officers. 70 crew members are locked in the cargo bay under constant guard. Our sensors show no unauthorized movement anywhere on the ship, yet my warriors continue to die. Perhaps the ship itself is fighting us, suggested one officer. These alien vessels have complex computer systems. Maybe the artificial intelligence is programmed to defend against boarders. Vex considered this possibility. Run a full diagnostic on all ship systems. If the computer is hostile, we will shut it down completely. But the diagnostic showed that all systems were functioning normally. The computer was not defending itself. Something else was responsible for the attacks. On the third day, the pattern changed. Instead of individual deaths, entire patrol groups began disappearing. 4 soldiers who were assigned to guard the lower decks simply vanished. Their weapons were found scattered in different locations, but their bodies were nowhere to be seen. The remaining crew members in the cargo bay began to notice changes in their captors' behavior. The Corvin guards were nervous and angry. They spoke in harsh whispers and kept looking over their shoulders. Some of them seemed to be afraid of their own shadows. Yunwoo managed to overhear part of a conversation between 2 guards. They were talking about the silent hunter and the demon in the walls. One of them claimed that several soldiers had reported seeing a figure moving through areas where no living being should be able to survive. "It moves through spaces too small for any normal creature," the guard whispered. "It appears from nowhere and vanishes before we can react. Some say it can walk through solid metal like a ghost." The other guard made a gesture that seemed to be a prayer or protective charm. "The war commander says it is just fear making us see things that are not there. But I have seen the bodies. Something is hunting us." That afternoon, a badly wounded Corvin soldier stumbled into the cargo bay. His armor was torn and sparking. One of his arms hung useless at his side. Green blood leaked from multiple cuts across his body. He collapsed near the entrance and began speaking in the Corvin language. His voice was weak and filled with pain. The universal translator picked up fragments of his words. "Shadow demon ... moves like wind ... strikes from above and below ... cannot fight what you cannot see." Captain Daewon moved closer to listen, but the dying soldier noticed him and switched to Broken Alliance Standard. "Your demon ... it hunts us. Kills without sound ... we cannot stop it ... It knows this ship better than we do." The soldier tried to say more, but his injuries were too severe. He died while the crew members watched in shocked silence. War Commander Vex arrived minutes later with a full squad of warriors. He stared at the dead soldier and then at the captured crew members. "Which one of you is responsible for this?" "He?" demanded. No one answered. The crew members looked at each other with genuine confusion. They had been locked in the cargo bay since the invasion began. None of them could have killed the soldier or any of the others. Vex grabbed Captain Down by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "I know one of your people is still free. Tell me where they are hiding, or I will start executing your crew one by one." Down struggled to speak with the alien's claws pressing against his windpipe. "I don't know. Everyone is here except except who?" Vex roared. "Minji," Dowan gasped. "Our engineer, she's missing." Vex threw Dowan to the ground and turned to his soldiers. "Find this Minji, search every compartment, every storage room, every maintenance shaft. Bring her to me alive if possible, dead if necessary." The Corvin warriors spread out through the ship with renewed purpose. They carried heavy scanners and cutting tools to break into sealed areas. They moved in groups of 6 or more, watching each other's backs constantly, but Minji was not hiding in any storage room or maintenance shaft. She was everywhere and nowhere, moving through the ship's infrastructure like water flowing through pipes. She used service tunnels that appeared on no official blueprints. She traveled through spaces between the hull plates where only repair robots were supposed to go. She had been watching the Corvin soldiers for 3 days, learning their patrol patterns and identifying their weaknesses. She knew which ones were leaders and which ones were followers. She knew where they stored their equipment and how they communicated with each other. Most importantly, she knew that they were beginning to break under pressure. Fear was spreading through their ranks like a disease. They were starting to make mistakes, leaving positions unguarded and failing to follow proper security procedures. The 4th day began. Minji prepared for the next phase of her campaign. The random attacks had served their purpose. Now it was time to be more direct. She had counted 43 Corvin soldiers remaining out of the original 70. Those numbers were acceptable for what she had planned next. From her hiding place in the ship's central computer core, Minji watched the security monitors showing her captured crewmates. They looked tired and frightened, but they were still alive. Captain Dowan was trying to keep everyone's spirits up by organizing quiet conversations and sharing what little food the Corvin provided. Seeing her friends suffering made something cold and hard form in Minji's chest. She had tried to avoid violence, tried to leave her old life behind. But some things could not be avoided. The Corvin wanted to hunt her? Fine. She would give them something to hunt, but they would not like what they found. Captain Dowan could not sleep. For 4 days he had watched his crew suffer under Corvin guard while mysterious deaths plagued their captors. The alien soldiers were becoming more violent and unpredictable with each passing hour. Something had to be done before fear drove them to massacre everyone in the cargo bay. During the night shift, when most of the guards were focused on their patrols, Dowan noticed that one security terminal near the cargo bay entrance had been left unattended. The Corvin soldier who usually watched it had been called away to investigate another disturbance. Moving carefully to avoid attracting attention, Dowan approached the terminal. His hands shook as he accessed the ship's internal security system. Most functions were locked down by Corvin control codes, but some basic monitoring systems were still active. He searched through the security camera logs, looking for any evidence of what had been happening throughout the ship. Most of the recordings showed empty corridors and normal ship operations from before the invasion. But buried in the massive amount of data, he found something that made his breath catch in his throat. The timestamp showed recordings from 6 hours after the Corvin had boarded the ship. The camera was positioned in a maintenance corridor on Deck 7. At first, the passage appeared empty. Then a ventilation grate opened silently and a figure dropped down into the hallway. It was Minji, but this was not the quiet, nervous engineer that Dowan remembered. This Minji moved with fluid precision and deadly purpose. She wore dark clothing that seemed to absorb light. Her face was painted with black streaks that broke up her outline in the shadows. In her hands, she carried weapons that had been improvised from ship components. Dowan watched in amazement as Minji approached a Corvin soldier who was standing guard at a junction. She moved like a predator stalking prey, using every shadow and blind spot to remain invisible. When she struck, it was swift and silent. The alien warrior dropped to the ground without making a sound. The recording continued, showing Minji dragging the body into a storage room. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion. Every action was calculated and precise. Dowan found more recordings scattered throughout the security logs. Each one showed the same deadly figure moving through the ship's hidden spaces. Minji appeared in maintenance shafts, service tunnels, and areas behind wall panels that most crew members did not even know existed. She seemed to know every inch of the ship's internal structure. In one recording, she disabled a group of 3 Corvan soldiers by rerouting electrical power through the deck plates where they were standing. In another, she used atmospheric controls to flood a section with sleeping gas before eliminating the unconscious guards. Each attack was different, using the ship's own systems as weapons. The most shocking recording showed Minji in hand-to-hand combat with 2 Corvan warriors. They were larger and stronger than her, armed with energy weapons and protected by armor. But Minji moved between their attacks like water flowing around stones. She struck at weak points in their armor with tools that cut through metal like paper. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Down realized he was watching recordings of someone with extensive military training. This was not an engineer who had learned basic self-defense. This was a professional soldier, possibly special forces or elite combat units. But Minji's personnel file showed no military service. She was listed as a civilian with technical education and work experience on cargo ships. As he continued searching through the security logs, Down found something else that made him question everything he thought he knew about his quiet crew member. Hidden in the deeper archive files was a partial recording from Minji's first day aboard the ship 8 months ago. The timestamp showed her entering her quarters for the first time. But instead of unpacking personal belongings like a normal crew member, she began systematically examining every surface and opening in the room. She checked for hidden sensors, weak points in the walls, and access routes to other parts of the ship. Her movements were those of someone conducting a security sweep. In the recording, Minji found a maintenance panel behind her sleeping area and opened it carefully. Inside was a narrow passage that connected to the ship's service tunnels. She spent nearly an hour mapping the route before finally beginning to unpack her few possessions. Dowan felt cold realization wash over him. Minji had not been a quiet engineer trying to avoid social interaction. She had been conducting reconnaissance, learning the ship's layout and preparing for exactly the kind of situation they now faced. But who was she really? And why had she been hiding her true identity? He was still searching through the files when footsteps approached the cargo bay. Dowan quickly closed the terminal and returned to his position among the other crew members. A moment later, War Commander Vex entered with a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The alien commander looked exhausted and angry. His compound eyes swept across the assembled crew members before focusing on Dowan. "Your engineer has killed 27 of my warriors," Vex announced. His voice carried a mixture of rage and grudging respect. "She moves through this ship like a ghost. My soldiers fear her more than they fear me." Dowan tried to keep his expression neutral. "I don't understand what you're talking about. Minji is just a technician. She repairs machines and maintains computer systems." Vex made that grinding sound that passed for laughter among his species. "Your Minji is no technician. She is a killer trained by warriors far more skilled than my own soldiers. She has turned your ship into a weapon against us." The alien commander activated a portable display device. Images appeared showing the aftermath of Minji's attacks. Bodies of Corvan soldiers in various states of destruction. Weapons cut in half by plasma tools. Armor melted by electrical overloads. Blast marks on walls where improvised explosives had been used. "Look at this work," Vex continued. "Each death was planned and executed with precision. She uses your ship's own systems against us in ways my engineers cannot counter." She knows exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. Captain Dowan stared at the images in shock. The destruction was far beyond anything a civilian engineer should be capable of creating. This was the work of someone with advanced military training and extensive combat experience. Yunwoo moved closer to Dowan and whispered, "That's impossible. Minji barely speaks to anyone. She's afraid of her own shadow." But as Dowan thought about it, he realized that Minji had never actually seemed afraid. She had been quiet and careful, but not frightened. She had avoided attention, but not because she was scared. She had been hiding something much more significant than simple shyness. "I want to make a deal with your engineer," Vex announced to the assembled crew. "She will surrender herself to me, and I will allow the rest of you to live as slaves instead of dying as examples." Down stood up slowly. "And if she refuses? Then I will begin executing your crew members one by one until she reveals herself, starting with the youngest." Vex pointed to Jaewon, the young technician who had always tried to befriend Minji too. Corvin soldiers grabbed the young man and dragged him forward. "You have 1 hour to convince your ghost to surrender," Vex declared. "After that, your people begin to die." The alien commander left with most of his soldiers, leaving only 4 guards to watch the crew. As soon as they were alone, the crew members began whispering among themselves. "Who is Minji really?" asked Youngmi. "Where did she learn to fight?" "Like that?" wondered Sunho. "How long has she been planning for something like this?" Added another crew member. Dowan had no answers for their questions, but he knew one thing for certain. The quiet engineer who had served aboard his ship for 8 months was not the person any of them thought she was. She was someone else entirely. Someone with skills and knowledge that could save them all or get them killed. As the hour deadline approached, Dowan found himself hoping that whoever Minji really was, she had a plan that went beyond just killing Corvin soldiers. Because if she didn't surrender, their captors would start murdering innocent people, and if she did surrender, they would all remain slaves of an empire that treated other species like livestock. Either way, their survival depended on the actions of a woman none of them truly knew. The hour passed in tense silence. War Commander Vex returned to the cargo bay exactly on schedule, his remaining soldiers spreading out in formation behind him. 41 Corvin warriors still survived out of the original 70. They looked nervous and kept glancing at the shadows as if expecting death to emerge from the darkness. Vex approached Jaewon, who was still being held by 2 guards. The young technician tried to appear brave, but fear showed clearly in his eyes. The alien commander raised one of his razor-sharp claws toward the young man's throat. "Your engineer has chosen to remain hidden while her crewmates die," Vex announced. "This one will be the first example." But before the claw could touch skin, a voice echoed through the ship's communication system. It was calm, clear, and completely unfamiliar to most of the crew members. "Release him." Everyone in the cargo bay looked up at the speakers in surprise. The voice belonged to a woman, but it carried an authority and confidence that none of them had ever heard from their quiet engineer. "Release them all," the voice continued, "and I'll consider letting you leave this ship alive." Vex stepped back from Jaewon and activated his communication device. "So the ghost finally speaks. Show yourself and we can discuss terms." There was a pause before Minji responded. "You want to see me?" "Look around you, Commander. I've been preparing this ship for 4 days. Every system, every corridor, every room has been modified for what comes next." As she spoke, the lights in the cargo bay began to dim. Emergency power activated, casting everything in a red glow that made the Corvin soldiers look even more menacing. But instead of creating advantage for the aliens, the lighting change seemed to unnerve them further. "Your threats mean nothing," Vex replied. "Surrender now or watch your friends die one by one." "You made a mistake when you boarded this ship," Minji's voice came back, still perfectly calm. "You assumed you were capturing a crew of harmless scientists and technicians. You were partly right. Most of these people are exactly what they appear to be, but not all of them." The cargo bay's main doors suddenly slammed shut with a metallic crash that echoed through the room, Emergency seals activated, locking everyone inside. The Corvin soldiers raised their weapons and began looking for targets, but they could see nothing except their captives and each other. Computer systems offline, one of the guards reported to Vex. Cannot override door controls from here. Minji's voice continued over the speakers. I spent 8 months learning every detail of this ship. Every weakness, every strength, every system that could be turned into a weapon. You see, I wasn't hiding from my past, I was preparing for it. The air circulation systems in the cargo bay shut down. Within minutes, the atmosphere began to feel heavy and stale. Several crew members started breathing harder, and the Corvin soldiers began making clicking sounds that indicated stress. What are you? Vex demanded. My name is Lieutenant Minji Kong, formerly of the Earth Defense Force Special Operations Division. I was part of a unit called Deep Strike Team 7. Our job was to board enemy vessels and eliminate hostile forces through guerrilla warfare. Captain Deon felt his heart skip a beat. Special Operations Division was the most elite military unit in human space. They were legends among military personnel, soldiers who could take on impossible odds and win through skill, training, and absolute ruthlessness. My team was killed during our last mission, Minji continued. I was the only survivor. After that, I retired from military service and took a position as a civilian engineer. I thought I could leave the violence behind and find peace among the stars. The lights flickered and power began shutting down to different sections of the cargo bay. The Corvin weapons started showing error messages as their energy sources were somehow drained. But you threatened my new family, Minji said, and for the first time her voice carried an edge of anger. You captured people I care about. You planned to torture them, enslave them, and kill them for your entertainment. That was your second mistake. Vex was becoming increasingly agitated. What was our first mistake? You let me prepare the battlefield. The floor plates in the cargo bay suddenly became electrified. Energy coursed through the metal, but somehow the current only affected the Corvin soldiers. Their armor conducted electricity directly into their bodies, causing them to convulse and drop their weapons. The crew members, wearing standard shoes, with rubber solace, remained unharmed as the aliens writhed on the electrified floor. Gas began seeping into the room through the ventilation system. It was colorless and odorless, but it made the Corvin soldiers become sluggish and confused while having no apparent effect on the human and other crew members. Species-specific nerve agent, Minji explained. It targets the Corvin nervous system specifically. Your soldiers will be unconscious in about 3 minutes. Vex managed to reach his communication device despite the electrical current running through his body. All units to cargo bay. Emergency assistance required. Your remaining soldiers are busy with their own problems, Minji replied. I've been working on them for the past hour while you waited for your deadline. Corridor 7 is filled with sleeping gas. Deck 5 has been flooded with water from the emergency fire suppression system. The bridge crew is trapped behind sealed doors with no life support. One by one, the Corvin soldiers in the cargo bay collapsed as the nerve agent took effect. Only Vex remained conscious, his stronger physiology allowing him to resist the chemical attack longer than his subordinates. This is impossible, he gasped. One person cannot defeat an entire invasion force. You're right, Minji said. One person can't defeat an army, but I'm not just one person, I'm a human. The main doors to the cargo bay opened with a soft hiss. Through the entrance walked the woman the crew had known as their quiet engineer. But this was not the same person who had avoided conversations and eaten meals. Alone, Minji wore black combat gear that looked like it had been assembled from ship components and survival equipment. Her face was painted with dark camouflage patterns. She carried weapons that had been improvised from mining tools and maintenance equipment, but they looked deadly in her hands. Most striking were her eyes. Gone was the uncertain, nervous expression the crew remembered. Instead, her gaze was focused and predatory. This was someone who had spent years learning how to kill efficiently and had returned to that mindset when her family was threatened. She walked past the unconscious Corvin soldiers without giving them a second glance. Her attention was focused. entirely on War Commander Vex, who was struggling to remain standing despite the nerve agent in his system. "You wanted to see me," Minji said, her voice now coming from her own throat instead of the ship's speakers. "Here I am." Vex raised his weapon with trembling hands, but Minji moved faster than he could track. She closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps and struck his wrist with a tool that looked like a modified plasma cutter. The weapon flew from his grasp and clattered across the floor. "Your empire made the same mistake that many others have made," she said as Vex fell to his knees. "You assume that humans are weak because we value peace and cooperation. You thought we were easy prey because we prefer negotiation to violence." She knelt down so that her face was level with his compound eyes. "But humans don't choose peace because we're weak. We choose peace because we know what we're capable of when we choose war instead." Vex tried to speak, but the nerve agent had finally overcome his resistance. He collapsed onto the electrified floor plates. Unconscious like the rest of his soldiers, Minji stood up and looked at her crewmates for the first time in 4 days. They stared back at her with expressions of shock, admiration, and something that might have been fear. "Is everyone all right?" she asked, and suddenly she sounded like the Minji they remembered. Quiet, careful, concerned for others. Captain Dowan found his voice first. "We're fine, thanks to you." Jaewon, who had come closest to execution, stepped forward hesitantly. "You saved us all, but why didn't you tell us who you really were?" Minji looked down at the unconscious Corvin soldiers surrounding them. "Because I was trying to leave that person behind. I wanted to be just an engineer who fixed machines and lived quietly among people I cared about. I thought I could forget about the violence and start over." She met his eyes, and he could see sadness there along with the deadly competence. "But some things follow you no matter how far you run. Some skills can't be unlearned, and some threats can only be answered with the tools you hoped you'd never need again." The ship's communication system activated with an incoming message from the Corvin fleet. "War Commander Vex, report your status immediately." Minji walked over to the communication panel and activated the response channel. When she spoke, her voice had returned to the cold authority of a special operations officer. "This is Lieutenant Minji Kang of the Earth Defense Force. Your invasion has failed. War Commander Vex and his boarding party have been neutralized. You have 10 minutes to withdraw from this system before I implement additional defensive measures." There was a long pause before the Corvin fleet commander responded. "One human cannot threaten an entire battle fleet. One human just destroyed your elite boarding force," Minji replied. "Would you like to test whether I can do worse to ships that can't run away as fast as soldiers can?" Another pause. Then the sensor displays showed the Corvin ships beginning to move away from the Harmony. Within minutes, they had jumped to hyperspace and disappeared from the system entirely. The crew stood in stunned silence as they realized their ordeal was finally over. They were safe, alive, and free because of the actions of someone they had barely known despite serving alongside her for 8 months. Minji turned away from the communication panel and began checking on the unconscious Corvin soldiers. "We'll need to lock these prisoners in the secure storage bay until we can turn them over to Alliance authorities," she said in a matter-of-fact tone. But as she worked, Captain Daewon noticed that her hands were shaking slightly. The deadly competence was still there, but underneath it was someone who had been forced to become a killer again when she had desperately wanted to remain at peace. 3 hours after the Corvin retreat, the crew of the Harmony gathered in the main dining hall. The unconscious alien soldiers had been secured in storage compartments with medical monitoring to ensure they remained alive but contained. The ship's systems had been restored to normal operation, but nothing else felt normal anymore. Minji sat at a table in the corner, just as she had done for 8 months. But now the empty space around her felt different. It was not the isolation of someone who was ignored. It was the respectful distance that people maintained around someone whose true capabilities they were only beginning to understand. Captain Down approached her table carefully. "May I sit with you?" She nodded without looking up from her meal. "Of course, Captain." He settled into the chair across from her and studied her face. The camouflage paint had been washed away, revealing the familiar features of the engineer he thought he had known. But her eyes still held depths he had never seen before. "I checked the Alliance military database," Dowan said quietly. "Lieutenant Minji Kong is listed as missing in action, presumed dead. The official report says Deep Strike Team 7 was lost during a classified operation 18 months ago." Minji continued eating without responding. Around them, other crew members pretended to focus on their own meals while obviously listening to every word. "The database also says that Deep Strike Team 7 was the most elite unit in human military history," Dowan continued. "Soldiers trained for impossible missions against overwhelming odds. Each team member was capable of single-handedly taking on enemy forces that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Finally, Minji looked up at him. "What do you want to know, Captain?" "I want to know why one of the Alliance's most decorated war heroes was hiding on my ship as a maintenance engineer." She was quiet for a long moment, considering how much truth to share. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of memories she had tried hard to forget. "My team was sent to infiltrate a pirate stronghold in the Vega system. Intelligence reports said we were facing a few dozen criminals with stolen weapons. But when we arrived, we found 3,000 heavily armed mercenaries with military-grade equipment." The dining hall had become completely silent. Even the alien crew members, who could not understand all the human words, sensed the importance of what they were hearing. "It was a trap," Minji continued. "Someone had sold information about our mission to the pirates. They were waiting for us with everything they needed to kill Special Forces soldiers." She stared down at her hands, remembering things she wished she could forget. "My team leader, Sergeant Kim, ordered us to abort the mission and return to our ship, but the pirates had surrounded our extraction point. There was no way out except through them." Captain Daon leaned forward. "What happened to your team?" "They died fighting to give me a chance to escape. 6 of the best soldiers I ever knew sacrificed themselves so that one person could survive to report what had happened. I spent 3 days hiding in the asteroid field around the pirate base, watching enemy patrols search for me." Minji's voice remained steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped her eating utensil. "When I finally made it back to Alliance space, the investigation showed that our mission intelligence had come from a source inside military command. Someone with high clearance had deliberately sent us into an ambush. Hyunwoo had moved closer to listen. Did they find out who betrayed your team?" "The investigation was classified and then closed without explanation. I was told that pursuing the matter further would compromise ongoing operations. They offered me a promotion and assignment to another Special Forces unit." She looked around the dining hall at faces that had become familiar over the past 8 months. "I refused. I resigned from military service and disappeared. As far as Alliance records show, Lieutenant Minji Kang died in the same ambush that killed the rest of her team." "But why become an engineer?" asked Youngmi. "You could have done anything." Minji managed a small smile. "Because I wanted to build things instead of destroying them. I wanted to fix problems instead of creating them. I thought if I could find a quiet job on a peaceful ship, I could leave the violence behind and become someone different." Sunho, the older engineer who had worked with her daily, spoke up. "You were different. You were the best engineer I ever worked with. You understood systems better than people who had been doing the job for decades. That's because military training teaches you to understand complex systems quickly," Minji explained. "Spaceships, weapons, enemy fortifications. They're all just different types of machines with different purposes. The principles are the same." Jaewon, who had almost been executed by the Corvin, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Are you going to leave us now? Go back to being a soldier?" Minji was quiet for a long time before answering, "I don't know. For 8 months, I convinced myself that I had left that life behind. But when you were all threatened, I became that person again without even thinking about it. I killed 29 beings in 4 days and felt nothing except satisfaction that my family was safe." She looked directly at Jaewon. "That should frighten you. It frightens me." Captain Daon reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. It doesn't frighten us, it makes us grateful. You saved our lives by being exactly who you are. Both versions of who you are, added Hyunwoo. The engineer who detected the Corvin ships before they attacked, and the soldier who fought them off when they did. The alien crew members began moving closer to the table. The Vorthak changed their crystalline bodies to colors that indicated respect and gratitude. The Quillen used their multiple arms to create gestures of appreciation. The Nethro sang a harmony that sounded like a song of thanks. We do not fear you, said Kelvin, one of the Vorthak representatives. We honor you. In our culture, those who protect the community are revered as living treasures. Your past does not define your future, added Zira, speaking for the Quillen. Your actions during this crisis show that you have found balance between your warrior nature and your peaceful desires. The Nethro's representative hum created musical tones that the universal translator converted to words. You chose to use violence only to protect innocence. This is the mark of wisdom, not something to be ashamed. Oh. Minji looked around at all the faces watching her with acceptance rather than fear. For the first time since the invasion began, her composure cracked slightly. Tears appeared in her eyes, though she tried to hide them. I was so afraid, she whispered. When I heard the Corvin threatening to hurt you, all I could think about was losing another family. I couldn't let that happen again. Captain Daon squeezed her hand gently. You didn't lose us. You saved us. And we're not going anywhere. Neither are you if you don't want to, added Hyunwoo. This is your home now. We're your family. But doesn't change because we learned you have skills we didn't know about? Minji wiped her eyes and managed a real smile for the first time in days. I'd like to stay, if you'll have me. Both versions of me. We wouldn't have it any other way. Daon replied. 2 weeks later, the Harmony reached the nearest Alliance station. The Corvin prisoners were turned over to military authorities, who were amazed to learn that an entire invasion force had been defeated by a single human. The crew's official report described the incident as a successful defense against pirate raiders, with no mention of Minji's true identity or military background, but word spread anyway, as word always does among spacers and military personnel. The story of the quiet engineer who fought alone against an army became legend in the taverns and meeting halls of a dozen worlds. Each telling made the tale a little larger, a little more impressive. The woman at the center of the legend continued her daily routine aboard the Harmony. She maintained the ship's systems, attended crew meetings, and shared meals with her colleagues. But now she spoke freely during conversations and joined in social activities. The isolation she had maintained for 8 months was replaced by genuine connections with people who knew all of her secrets and accepted them. Sometimes, during quiet moments in the engineering section, she would remember her fallen teammates and wonder what they would think of her new life. She thought they would be proud that she had found a way to protect innocent people without losing herself in violence. And late at night, when the ship traveled through the peaceful darkness between stars, Minji would sit in the observation lounge and watch the universe pass by. She was no longer hiding from her past or running toward an uncertain future. She was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by family who valued both her gentle heart and her warrior spirit. The quiet engineer had found her voice, and when she spoke, the galaxy listened.